I'm RB, the host of RB's Kitchen Talk, and thank you so much for joining me and my special guest, Pastor Stacy Hayes, who is the executive pastor at Fresh Word Kingdom Assemblies in Voorhees, New Jersey. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you
Welcome.
so much for having me. So glad to be here.
Mhm. I am looking forward to this discussion. But before we get into it really deeply, I'm hoping, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and your work in ministry?
Um, I am 50 years old.
Mhm.
I have been in ministry probably since about 19 or so. So it's been quite a few years.
Mhm.
Um, my wife and I have been married 28 years in July. We have three adult children, twins that are about to turn 24, and my oldest will be 26 in September. And God has been good. God has been good.
Congratulations.
And outside of ministry, I also work as a probation officer for Camden County.
All
So
right.
yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing. And I don't know about you, but I've been looking forward to this conversation for ever since we spoke. And it's a pleasure to meet you. And I have actually been to your church a couple of times and
Oh, okay.
was
Great,
blessed in the service. Yes.
great,
So
great.
let's get going. Now, men have the awesome responsibility of leading their families. And when we think about men leading, we often think about their ability to provide and to protect. So it's rare that we talk about how emotional intelligence, which is what we want to talk about today, actually equips them to be much more effective in their roles and in the various hats they wear, whether it's just in the workplace or in the family or even in church. And I think that that's one of the reasons why this topic is so important to me, because I've seen many more younger men, millennials, uh, without the ability to get in touch with their emotions. And it's not to say that they're soft or anything of that nature, but it's important because it impacts relationships in a very strong way. And so, my question to you then is, what does emotional intelligence mean to you in your role? Mhm.
Um, as a husband and as a father, um, I think emotional intelligence it starts with you before it impacts anyone else.
Mhm.
Um, we are in a we are in a seriously intensive competitive society.
Mhm.
And I think, and not just as men, just women, we're
Mhm.
always competing to have the most, do the most, accomplish the most, look the best. It's a very competitive of society, and I think that plays a role in your because competitiveness creates emotional anxiety to a degree. And I'm not talking about if you're an athlete and you go on the field or the court and you do that, you're able to turn that off when you leave the court. But
Mhm.
if you are a competitive person, and we as a society are filled with competitive people, you carry that pressure to always to compete and to compare. And I think it impacts your ability to empathize because we're in this mindset that we always have to win,
Mhm.
and it impacts how we communicate with one another. It impacts so many things. It's just the mindset or the current of our society. And if you're not careful in those times where you should be actively listening and be empathetic, even in our conversations with our wives and our children and our spouses, you find yourself talking to win.
Mhm.
And I think emotional intelligence is first and foremost about being secure uh, with whom you are as a person and
Mhm.
not feeling the need to compete or impress anyone else. And I think that just that from the door creates a level of emotional and psychological settling
Mhm.
that allows you to value people different and even hear them differently.
Right. So, on the theme of being competitive, that just sounds almost counterproductive, especially when you're in a relationship, right?
Yeah.
Because You're supposed to be working as a team,
Absolutely.
and as opposed to against one another. So where do you think that, why has that feeling or that need entered into relationships, do you think? Is it just because of the culture we're in, and you're unable to leave that outside of the house, and you just kind of bring it in? Is that what
Um,
could potentially be?
yes, and internal and external. And when you asked me at first, when we started out, you asked me about ministry. I did not mention that my wife and I, we've been doing premarital counseling through our ministry for probably 20 years now. So we deal with a lot of the dating, and I know this is not a marriage segment, but plays such a huge part in what we're talking about. And I think that in our relationships, a lot of time, particularly within marriage, um, one of the things that I share with couples is that um, when we're down, when things aren't right, we disperse, we separate from each other. But teams that win, when they're down in points, they huddle, they call a timeout, and they
Yeah.
gather together to talk about why we're losing, what areas are we weak in, and and many times, and not just marital relationships, but relationships with our children, coworkers. The second there's conflict, we go silent,
Mm.
and if you disperse when you're down in points, you never find out why you're losing, and you're more
Right.
prone to repeat the same mistakes. So I think the 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 honesty, the honesty of saying, things are not right, and why, and going into that conversation uh, with the daring thought that it might actually be you. That the daring, the audacity to believe that it could actually be you, and you could actually play some part in it. So I think, um, and you mentioned outside of the home and inside of the home, but I think that the dynamic, I don't believe in the notion that we're different people.
Okay.
I think that people say all this, oh, I know who I am at work, but when I go home, the real me comes out, and all these kind of things. But if you look at it, we got the same 24 hours in a day. If you're
Yeah.
working 8 to 10 hours a day and you sleep 6 to 8 hours a day,
Right.
you can't be someone else for a third of your life.
Exactly. I
It's,
agree with you. I
it may
agree with
be a different
you.
variation of who you are, but it's still you.
Same person. I
Yeah,
agree.
absolutely.
I think it should be. You've already hit on a couple of things, and I don't want to get ahead of myself, but you mentioned this communication and how there's the possibility that we're not communicating, and as much as we should, because if we were communicating, perhaps some things, so perhaps we wouldn't be going to our separate corners because we'd be talking. Do you find that men struggle more than women do in terms of saying, "Well, no, come on, let's get together and find out what's actually happening"? Or do you think that they both share in this responsibility, and that's why marriages have been successful?
I think that it's, and I don't want to put all men in one, in one
Sure,
pot.
of course, of
But I
course.
think our upbringing, particularly the older you are, um, if you were fortunate enough to have a father in a home, um, the role of a father a generation ahead of me, or behind me, I should say, they did things very different. Their role was provider, keep the lights on, keep a roof over everyone's head, and go to work every day, and communication, interaction, and interpersonal connection wasn't at the top of the priority list. So if you grew up in that environment, it becomes a little bit more difficult, um, if you haven't seen it. I'm a witness that you can be what you haven't seen, but it takes a little bit more effort. It takes more, to be more intentional, and to tap into the needs of those that matter most to you. Because at the end of the day, that's what this is all about. You don't want to lose your son. You don't want to lose your daughter. You don't want to lose your spouse. So it's about, um, is my ego or whatever it is that's hindering me from communicating, is it worth the long term effects of the gap or the separation
Mhm.
that could take place if I don't properly nurture these relationships.
Okay, good. I'm glad you said that because first you started out by saying, and I want to kind of dig a little deeper in it. You said that it's this emotional intelligence begins with you as an individual. It's
Yep.
something that you need to see as important for yourself, but you're also doing it in order to preserve the relationships that you have, whether it's regardless of where those relationships might lie. So it begins with you and then it flows to others. So how do men find the strength to see how important this is if they've never had a role model?
Um,
Where does this need to be better flow from a male's perspective?
uh, the, I think that the need comes from uh, recognizing the needs of those around you. First and foremost, and I, and I don't want to say it goes without saying because in many cases it doesn't. I think that a relationship with God is cornerstone, and you have to have some level of foundational truth that you're working from to even set your moral barometer in life. I think without that, it becomes much more difficult without some type of moral compass or some type of belief system that you see as the bedrock for why you do what you do, because that becomes the springboard for everything else. But I think we are especially if you have children. Um, our children are light years ahead of where we were in terms of just uh, the amount of information that they receive and the amount of information that they have access to. So they're used to being spoken to. They're used to processing information. So going mute doesn't work well for them at all. They want to know that you understand them. They want to know that they're heard. They want to know that you're able to listen to them. The time of children being seen, not heard, is not a thing anymore.
Mhm.
They need to be heard, and if you don't hear them, someone else will. So, but going back to the piece on it starting within, because I think everything that hinders your emotional intelligence is strengthened by selfishness. I think because that's when because if you ask anyone, most people when they talk about marriage, they'll say, "Why do marriages fail?" And they'll say the top three: communication, money, and sex. And those are the top three. But the reality is, if you go a little deeper, all of those problems stem from selfishness. Communication doesn't work because I want to communicate the way I want to communicate. I want you to hear the way I want to be heard. Sex doesn't work because I want it how and when I want it.
Okay.
Money doesn't work because I want to spend it the way I want to spend it. So the root, those are just offshoots from the root that is selfishness. And I think that that level of selfishness is probably the greatest hindrance to authentic emotional intelligence.
Mm.
You got to get past you.
Wow. That's powerful. That's powerful. And so, as a Christian, you would think that it's easy enough to do when you're standing in the presence of a God who is perfect
Mhm.
and you see how imperfect you are. And
Yeah.
so, because of that, there should be something within that says, you know what, that's pulling on you, that says, I've got to be better because
Yeah.
I've received so
That's
much grace, right?
yeah.
So, because of the grace that I've been extended, I ought to be able to extend that to others. But it takes two individuals making sure that they see the same goal ahead, right? Because
Right.
if you don't have the same goal, it's difficult. Would you not
Right.
agree? Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. The Bible says that how can two walk together unless they be in agreement?
Yeah.
And uh, hopefully, we're even in our. I'm laughing and I'm saying this. Even going back to our relationships, and marriage and things like that. Um, in our choosing from the beginning, hopefully you find someone that has similar goals, and
Mhm.
unfortunately. Um, I liken it to shopping. I think when you walk into a store and you see a sign that says all sales are final, you shop different. You check for holes and
Oh,
you try it on, and
yeah,
But if they say if it doesn't work, you can return it in 10 days. You just throw anything in the cart.
that's true.
And I think our culture has said that if marriage doesn't work, you can throw it back in the cart and bring it back. And so we don't shop the same way. We don't
Mhm.
shop with the same amount of intentionality and detail. So hopefully you started with someone who is headed in the right direction. But it is and going back to the Christianity piece and your relationship with God, I think that is, um, as Christians, we are told, we are instructed and encouraged to spend time with God and to engage Him through His Word, through prayer, through all of these things that help us to deny ourselves. And when it comes to the selfishness piece, there's no way that you can consistently spend time in the presence of God and still be impressed with yourself.
Right.
So
I
the more thrilled and taken you are with you, I would dare say, the less time you spend in the presence of God,
Mhm.
because it strips you. It strips you in a way that makes you, um, uh, even Isaiah says, the year King Uzziah died, I saw the Lord, and then he looks back at himself and he says, I'm a man that's undone. I'm an unclean man, and I dwell among unclean people. And I think, taking that time to engage in the presence of God, it shows you on a deeper level. And not only do you embrace the mercy, the love, and the grace of God, you see how undone you are. And hopefully, that sight or that vision would make you more patient with others. And I think that's where the seat of emotional intelligence is found. Um, it's being able to have a clear view that's of yourself that's not distorted.
Yeah.
It's like that little mirror at the makeup counter. When you flip it over, it shows you all the
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
imperfections, and it gives you more of a realistic view of who you are. But I think, in emotional intelligence in its purest form is being honest with yourself and allowing other people to be honest with themselves, and being patient and understanding with that.
Okay.
I'm
I'm
sorry,
glad
it's very long.
no, but I mean, I'm glad you said honesty because that is so key. Um, I think it goes along with these being selfless.
Yes.
It's it's the ability to look within and say, I'm not perfect. But it's not just saying I'm not perfect. It's going a step forward, I think, to say, neither are you. So let's do this imperfect together. You
Yes.
know,
Yes. Very well said. Absolutely.
but you've got to be honest and in saying, you know what? No, I don't have it all together, but I'm trying, and if we are trying together, that makes a difference.
Yeah.
But when you're not able to be honest, that's where I think it gets really tricky.
And it may seem, like something that's just a given, but also to be emotionally intelligent, you have to care. You have to genuinely care. I think, that is a huge step, um, to emotional intelligence. It's genuinely caring. Just something as simple as asking someone how they're doing and meaning it and stopping and listening for a response. So many times, hey, how you doing? All right, good, fine. We go on with our day. And you may not be able to do that with everyone, but you'd be surprised how many people, when you ask them how they're doing
Mhm.
and you pause, they're surprised because, do you really care? You really want to know how I'm doing? Yes, I'm asking for a reason. And
Yes.
I think, genuinely being concerned about people again, and you can't do that if you're selfish, if you don't get outside of yourself. And I've found, with time and God dealing with me, there's so much of my personal healing that has come
Mhm.
when I came out of myself and cared for other people.
Mhm.
I found so much healing in it.
Healing. Well, that requires being honest, right?
Yes.
Because um, everyone wants to be on their best behavior. Everyone wants to be seen in a certain light, right?
Yeah.
And that requires honesty and admitting that, you know what, there are some areas, as you've said, in my life where I've been broken, where I need to be healed, where something's happened, and perhaps a past relationship, or I don't know, whatever it is, but there's a part of you that's not whole.
Yeah. Yeah.
And recognizing that might be a barrier to becoming who you need to be in your relationship.
Absolutely. And I think, it's that place where, let's take you and I for an example. You and I haven't known each other for a very long time,
Mhm.
but if I am well aware of the things that I've done throughout my life that were not good, that were
Mhm.
poor choices, lapses in judgment, whatever you want to call them. And with all that I know about me, if you were to ask me, yeah, do you think you're a pretty good person? I would say, yeah, probably. Yeah, I think I'm a pretty good person. And if I can come to that conclusion, knowing everything about me, but I only speculate when it comes to you, why not give you the same consideration when I
Mhm.
don't know you nearly as well as I know me?
Mhm.
But I'm not saying literally you, but I'll judge you on what I've heard or what I think,
Mhm.
and that's speculatory. That's
Mhm.
speculative. But
Mhm.
I know me, and I'll still give myself the grace of being considered a good person. But I'll condemn you on what I think, and extend grace to myself based on what I know.
Mhm. Right. That's
You know,
good. Yeah, that's good. Let's talk a little bit about Adam and Eve. And we know that Eve was formed from Adam's rib to be his helpmeet. In relationships, is there is there any significance to uh, this this oneness that is, I believe, God intended between man and woman as a result of how she came from him? Is there a part of him, when we speak of emotional intelligence, that is in fact connected, and that there's something that happened that disconnected, that caused um, man to be less emotional? Because women, I think it's clear, is emotional, is more of an emotional being. So is there something that's there in man that needs to be nurtured?
um, that's a loaded question. um, when I think about Adam and Eve, I think about how in the Bible everything that God created was good. He said it was good. The first time you hear God say that it's not good is when he gets to the man being alone. Everything else up until that point was good. The first time God says this is not good is when the man is alone. So um,
Hmm.
when he created the woman, the man became good. And that union brought them to a place of good. And now you fast forward, when Adam falls in the garden, um, his response to God was, "I heard your voice and I hid myself." And Adam, men, when we find ourselves at fault, it's in our nature, our Adamic nature, to hide. Two things that Adam did: he hid himself and he deflected. He said to God, "It was the woman you gave me." In other words, you're just as much responsible for this problem as I am. So he
Mhm.
deflected blame from himself and he hid himself. And that has been a part of our nature as men. Um, and just because something is hidden doesn't mean that it's not there. And I think you mentioned, you said, women being more emotional beings. I don't know if that's necessarily the truth. I just think that men are better at hiding it because
Okay.
that's what we've always done. And I think, um, just to give a brief analogy, if you look at something like infidelity, you look at infidelity. A woman may be in a situation where her heart was broken, and because of that, she may not date for another year or two because her heart was broken. A man may have his heart broken, and he might go out a week later with a woman, but it will take him twice as long to love again. Different manifestation, different way of expressing what he feels, but it doesn't mean that he feels less. He's just responding to it differently. And so I think we're better at hiding what we feel, but it doesn't mean that we don't feel. I mean, I think we do. And I think that women kind of are less hidden when it comes to what they feel, but I wouldn't say that we are any less emotional. And I think this is why we deal with the heart attacks and the heart disease and all these things, because we internalize a lot and we hide a lot. But men feel just as much as women do, if not more, I believe.
I've heard that said, and I don't disagree with you, and I completely agree that the expression is different, and that it's held in more
Yeah,
so.
yeah,
And I think that's probably part of the frustration that women have, because they are expressive and they don't always know what their partner is thinking or doing, because it's hidden.
yeah.
And it's a it's a struggle to express, which often leads women sort of in the dark because they don't know
Yeah.
what's going on inside.
And I think men have far less outlets for their emotions. The only one, I won't say the only, but one of the only emotions that men get a pass on is anger. Because anger can be used in combat. Anger can be used on the football field. Anger can be used. That's the only emotion for so many years we've been had a green light to express openly. You know, but grief, shame, guilt, all these other emotions. You know, they're so frowned upon when they're outwardly expressed, that it creates a level of vulnerability that a lot of men are just not willing um, to own, or to accept. And being emotionally intelligent does require a level of vulnerability, because once I tell you what I feel, you get a lens to what's going on inside of me. I mean, I'm a I'm a I'm a big guy. I'm a big black guy, big bald-headed black guy. I walk down the street, and people kind of, you know, if someone's riding down the street looking for somebody to kidnap, I'm not their first choice. You know what I mean? And so, and that's something that you see, and I can do nothing about what you perceive when you see me. So I can do all these things. You can work out, you can look tough, you can carry a weapon, you can do all those things to change people's perception of how they see you on the outside. But it's not until I tell you how I feel that you get a lens to what's actually going on inside of me. Now I've opened up, and then now there's a level of vulnerability. And I think it's important for women to understand that, and men and women, whenever someone gives you a light or insight into their heart, cherish that. Don't violate it. Don't abuse it. Because when your vulnerability is turned and used as a weapon against you, it's hard to get men out of that space. It's hard. It's hard, and there's so many other things that I could go into. Even as it relates to ministry and churches and things like that. It's like, women will go to church for 35 years and have people at the church that they don't like and don't get along with, but they'll keep coming. But you get a man that's offended, he walks out the door. It's so hard to get him back, because once I've exposed myself, that once that vulnerability is not embraced, it's that door shuts and it's a tight lock on it.
Why?
I think, again, going back to the childhood, um, a funny story about that, and I had to catch myself on this one. My wife and I, we have boy and girl twins. And if you ever want to do a case study on the difference between male and females, have boy and girl twins. They come from the same house, eat the same food, have the same parents, but are like night and day. And I remember a time when my kids were very young and they were playing soccer, and their teams would play right after each other. So we'd spend a whole Saturday at the field playing soccer. And I remember a time where my daughter was playing and she got hurt. Someone hit her and she fell to the ground, and I could see her eyes panning the audience looking for me. And the second she made eye contact with me, she burst out into tears. And I ran out there and grabbed her, my little girl. And that same day, the exact same thing happened to my son. And I remember looking at him, watching him pan the audience looking for me, and saying to myself, don't do it. 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 And I had to catch myself, and he didn't do it, but I had to realize in that moment that, and this is what we get. Had he looked at me and cried from that field, every other boy on that field would have saw him differently. And that's where it starts. That's where it starts, and I felt bad about it. And I felt bad that I felt good that he didn't cry. Later on, I'm admitting, I'm open about it.
Yes.
I felt bad that felt good, because not because I wasn't concerned about my son, not because I didn't love him, but I played sports in school and I knew what that meant. And why it means that, I don't. We've been conditioned. This never let them see you sweat, and vulnerability being a sign of weakness is so deeply ingrained, especially if you play sports like football. You go out on the football field, if you look hurt, that's the part they're going for. You look like you're limping. That's the leg they're going after the next play. And so you condition yourself to hide your pain. And you couple that with the whole reward system. Oh, if you get an A in class, I'll take you to get ice cream. Or, oh, look, Mom, I did good. Oh, look, Mom, I got an A on the test. Look, I got a trophy. And you spend your whole life looking for that, sometimes female affirmation. Look, I did it. You go from, I got a star on my paper, to look, honey, I brought home the paycheck. I paid the mortgage. And it just goes on throughout your life, because so many times we want that affirmation, and sometimes the fear of being viewed as any less than the strongest or the best. We often don't give ourselves that room to do that. So I think it starts from childhood, and it's a very unfortunate thing. And after that moment, I did do much better. And I report today, and I can say this today. I have a son. That same little boy will be 24 years old, and on May 2nd, and I can say he does not hang up a phone or walk out a door without saying, Dad, I love you, and hugging me.
Nice.
Every time, 100% of the time, even when I forget. He'll come, knock on the door, Dad, I'm headed out, love you, and hug me. And because that was a very pivotal moment for me from childhood, and I was very intentional about helping him get beyond that, And so I'm very glad, by the help of God, to report that my son can sit down with me when he has tears in his eyes, and it's okay to feel. And I've worked very hard at that, like I said, by the help of God. But it's so deeply ingrained in us. It's such a systemic problem.
Okay. I'm going to give you a word as it pertains to men, and tell me what you think. All right, we've already talked about a few: vulnerability, but let's go with respect.
Pivotal. I mean, it's imperative, because in most cases, we'd rather be respected than even liked. I've heard so many men say, "You might not like me, but you're gonna respect me." And I think, and one more thing I'll say to that word, I think one of the biggest problems that we've created in our society is the term that respect is earned. Respect should be given. Disrespect should be earned. If I walk into, if I'm on a bus and an elderly woman walks on the bus, she shouldn't earn my respect. She should be offered my respect. I think everyone deserves to be respected. And now, if you prove disrespect, you have to prove and earn that. But I think when we stopped offering respect and making people earn it, if you tell me that respect is earned, that means until I earn your respect, you automatically disrespect me.
Mm. Okay.
So I think that's a big problem. Respect should be offered freely.
Oh, freely. Okay.
Disrespect needs to be earned.
Okay. All right. Understood.
And that's just my opinion.
Okay. Empathy.
Empathy, key. If you can't walk in my shoes, at least mentally, and put yourself in the space that I'm in, it's going to be very difficult for you to help me in any way, because you can't. It's very difficult to be angry with someone that you understand.
It's good. Yeah.
Because and sometimes understanding comes from, as believers, learning to pray for people and not about them.
Mm.
Because sometimes with our children, oh Lord, this child is crazy. Oh, this husband is this. Lord, and you're praying about them, but you're not praying for them. Oh,
Yeah.
that this president is so and so, whatever it is.
Yes.
And it takes a lot to get beyond yourself to genuinely pray for people. And when you pray for people, that's when God begins to give you insight as to why they are the way they are. And it's very difficult to be angry with someone that you understand. Even if you don't like their behavior, if I understand the root cause of it, I can get past my anger. So I think empathy is very key, very key.
Just to follow up, we've all been misunderstood. We've all been hurt. We've all experienced the same experiences in one form or the other. So, why is it such a challenge then for some to extend that empathy?
I think a lot of it goes back to what we spoke about earlier, and um, the competitive nature of our society. Um, you know, if you're running a race and the guy next to you stumbles and falls, you don't empathize with him. You see that as an opportunity, and that's how we live our lives in many cases. The um, the old saying, the old joke when they say, if a bear is ever after you and your friend, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun your friend. you know? And that's and but unfortunately that's the mentality that so many of us has. And when if you see my fall as your advantage, you're never going to be empathetic toward my fall. Even if you yourself have fallen, you see my fall as an opportunity for you to catch up. And if you're competitive in everything that you do, empathy goes out the window, because, like I said, it's seen in so many different arenas. We see it every day, where the fall of someone else becomes the victory of someone else. So we look and watch and anticipate watching each other fall. We see it all the time.
Mm. Criticism.
Criticism has to be, it's the how, because there is a such thing as constructive criticism. Then there's so many components to that. There's body language, there's tone, and then that goes back into the communication piece. But if I say criticism, it has a negative connotation. But if you write a paper and you ask someone to critique it, it's the same word. It's not viewed as negative. It's viewed as help. You
Mhm.
know, so criticism can be help. I think that the word has a more negative connotation, but to critique something means to find flaws to make it better. So I think criticism rides the effectiveness of it rides on the how in the presentation.
Okay. Okay. Insecurities.
Universal, universal. I think we all have levels of insecurity, and that's the one area of empathy I think we all can, but again, we're all conditioned to hide those insecurities, and we all have our resume interview face, and and those are the people that get the job. Sometimes it's not even about your knowledge base or how skilled you are. People get jobs based on how well they interview, how well you present yourself. So because of that, insecurity is something that's frowned upon. It's you can't separate insecurity from vulnerability. We want to feel secure. We put locks on our home to be secure,
Mhm.
because I don't want anyone to just walk in here, and so if I'm insecure, or I feel vulnerable, I don't feel steady in this particular area. um, Again, it's not something that's embraced, and it's something that I think we all feel it. We all feel it to one degree or another, and we all have areas that we're really strong and secure in. We're like Peter, we're that rock, and then we're not. And so
Mhm.
everyone's good at something, and if you're put in that space, you can flourish. I've known people that were, oh, so intelligent and so competent, but can't they're not good communicators. So you put them in front of people and they feel insecure. I had a conversation this week with a coworker, one of the most intelligent, competent young ladies who just doesn't do well with interviews, and that's an area of insecurity for her. And she talked to me about how she gets in that space and just her mind just goes blank,
Yeah.
and super competent, super intelligent. And we all have those rooms that we can sit in, and we feel inadequate depending on who's in that room, and what's the focus.
So, how then do couples in relationships forge the oneness they need in order to be successful, in order to advance the kingdom, in order to fulfill their purpose, which begins at the home level, dealing with all of these issues that affect their emotional intelligence. So we've talked about the empathy, we've talked about vulnerability and how we respond, the insecurities. How do couples get to the point of being able to flow freely so that there is that oneness and they can begin to move forward and see progress and see growth? How is it accomplished?
Well, I can only speak about my wife and my marriage. um, I think synergy is so important, and synergy being the idea that one plus one equals two or more. And I have I wholeheartedly believe when I say, there are some things that my wife may not know. There are a lot of things that I don't know. But if you put the two of us together, it's very little that we can't accomplish. And the idea that neither of us is as good as both of us. I think embracing that I'm always better when she's thinking with me, and vice versa. And we both have our insecurities, we both have our issues, just like everyone else out there. But I'm better if she's with me. And I think that piece, and it speaks to even compatibility. I often say, you know, in most cases, God will put two people together. Most people that have lasting marriages will tell you this. You'll have a visionary person and you'll have a logistics person. One person that goes, let's take this mountain, let's buy this house, let's do this. And another person with the pen and paper that goes, well, we're gonna have to tighten up here and do this. And you need those two things, because if you get two visionaries, you'll be broke. If you get two logistics people, you'll overthink everything. But sometimes that compatibility can be a point of contention. And it can be the thing that frustrates you. But even in that frustration, it creates a level of balance and symmetry. And I think what makes relationships work, I don't think that it's some big formula or anything like that. I think it comes with two people that understand that I'm better with you. I need you. You complement me. That has been, people, oh my God, you guys are wonderful. We're just like everybody else. But what has made my marriage work for these 27 years is both of us having that understanding that, if you want the best out of me, let me work with her. You want the best out of her, and our brains work so beautifully different that I wouldn't have it any other way. And sometimes it is frustrating. Sometimes we don't agree on things. But I know that when I walk away from even that disagreement, I'm going to go, she's 60% right. She's 60% right, and not fighting that, but embracing. And I've had so many people say, oh my God, I can't, he gets on my nerves, she gets on my nerves because she's so different. And I'm like, no, that's the secret sauce, and embracing that. And for me, I think faults, mistakes, and all, I'm better with her. She's an amazing person. And I believe she'd say that she's better, better with me.
I'm sure she would. I'm sure.
And I think that has been, like I say, I don't think it's in any just something as simple as turning and appreciating your differences and finding the good in that, and finding how, because marriage is not for everyone. If you had it all figured out, you could have stayed by yourself and done just fine.
Mm-hmm.
But I have this person that I believe that God has chosen for me to walk through life with. And so why would I join myself to someone and then think that I have all the answers? What's the point?
That's smart. Very smart.
What's the point?
One last question, and then I'm going to allow you to close. What would you say then to a young man who's just embarked on a marriage and is struggling with being vulnerable or being empathetic, or struggling with communicating? What would you tell him?
Now, is this a person in a relationship or?
Just embarked on, yes, a new relationship, or is just married?
Okay. I think that I think premarital advising is so important. It's so underrated. And I think that talking to people who have stood the test of time is very important at different stages, because sometimes you can go too far out. You talk to somebody that's married for 60 years. The time when they were in your shoes, the whole world has changed. So maybe 10, 15 years out, that still understand. Not saying that those people don't have anything to offer, which they do, but it's more in a broader sense. But I think seeking counsel and embarking on this relationship, sitting with someone who can help you deal with as many knowns as possible, because marriage is going to have a laundry list of unknowns that are coming that you will never be able to foresee. But I would recommend by the time you walk down that aisle, try your best to confront as many knowns as you possibly can. So that at the very least, you're walking into as much of a clear slate as possible. Your fears, your insecurities. I know it's difficult to do, but the more, because if you're going to spend your life together, it's all going to come out eventually. But the more you express to each other now, the less surprised you'll be later on.
Okay.
And I would rather you surprise me on this side of the broom than on the other.
On the other side.
So counsel is very important. I think it's very important.
Okay. I'm going to let you close us. What are your final comments? What might you say to someone who's struggling with emotional intelligence?
I would say that if you have the right person or people in your life, it's worth the work. It's worth it. And it's a journey. It's a journey. I wouldn't say that I went into marriage as this big open book, but over time, and I'm still working on it every day. But I think the more that I come out of myself, the more enriched my relationships become. Once a person has proven that they can be trusted with your heart, keep pouring into that container. Keep pouring more of yourself into it, and you won't regret it, because it is, marriage can be beautiful. It can be beautiful. It can be fulfilling, but we have to get past the external social and cultural stuff that's out there. Once we can sift through all of the cultural do's and don'ts, and the competing and all of that, and get to the heart of marriage the way that God designed it for it to be. He designed it to be beautiful. He even likens it to his relationship with his church. And when he says that marriage is likened into Christ's relationship with his church, the very next thing that he says is that he gave himself.
Mm-hmm.
And all of these sons and daughters Christ has gained through just the act of giving himself. And when you give yourself, it's always fruitful. It's always beneficial. And the last thing that I would say, particularly to women, and men, and this may be helpful to men too, God gave you eternal life simply because you believed in him. And there's nothing that a man won't give to a woman that believes in him.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Thank you.
Thank you.
I really enjoyed this conversation. Thank you for sharing as much as you did. I mean, I've taken so much away, and I'm sure everyone who's viewed this or who will as well.
Thank you
Thank you.
so much for having me. I really appreciate it. It's been a joy. Thank you.
Welcome. All right. Take care, and God bless you.
God bless you.
All right, then. Bye-bye.
Oh, yes, ma'am.
Yes. Oh my goodness. Thank you so very much.
Did I talk to you?
No, you did not. No, I was taking it all in, and I can definitely see why you and your wife have a ministry sowing into the lives of couples or those who are thinking of being couples, because you're
It's
such a blessing.
Yeah, it's so close to my heart. It really is.
Yeah.
And, that's where it all starts. Strong marriages make strong families make strong communities and strong churches and
Yes.
so on and so forth. So if you can, help people to get on the right track
Yeah.
as it relates to their marriage. So much is impacted. I feel like we make the world better when we help couples. I do.
Yeah, and you do, because there are so many couples that are struggling. And as you were talking, I thought about myself, and my marriage, and how difficult it was, and how much easier it would have been had there been couples or other people who could have sowed into our lives.
Yes. Yeah. Yes.
And if you don't have that, it's very difficult, especially if walls are built, and you're operating in silos. And so it is so very important. And I don't think enough people realize that. But as you were talking, I said, I'm prayerful that this podcast really touches the lives of both men and women.
I hope so. I really pray that's the case. I do. Because it's so needed. It's so needed, and with just the, especially here in our country, all that we're dealing with right now.
Mm-hmm.
With the level of pressure and frustration and all the other emotions that we deal with every day when we leave our houses to go to work. If men and women don't have loving homes to return to,
Mm-hmm.
it makes everything increasingly more difficult.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, it's so true, because you're battling outside of the home, and then you come home and you're battling there.
Yes.
A different battle, but yes,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's unfortunate.
And we see the results of so many people breaking under that pressure.
Yeah.
And it's really sad. And you leave out the house, you go to these workplaces, you go, wherever it is you go from day to day, you really don't have much control over what happens, what's said to you, how you treat it, and to have a place that's a safe haven, and just even if it's one or two people that genuinely care,
Yeah.
I don't care if it's a 2-year-old running up to you, or even your dog running up to you, wagging his tail, just that acceptance when you get home, it means so much,
It does. It really
it
does.
means a lot. And early on, my oldest daughter is only 19 months older than our twins.
Mm-hmm.
So we had 3 kids under 2 years old.
Really?
Yes.